Earlier this week, I had the privilege to sit down and have a conversation with Jody T. Morse, a writer who lives in Evergreen, Texas. At the time we had that conversation, she was at her ranch in Evergreen, a town just north of Houston, Texas. Jody is a multi-genre writer. She's truly multitask. She's poet, she's memoirist, and also novelist. And she's best noticeable for her collection of poetry, which was published in several magazines and other publications, not just in Texas, but also in several other venues around the country. So it's an honor for me to sit down and have Jody T. Morse this week in the conversation. But before we get into the video, I just want to remind everyone, it's important to subscribe to the channel. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell. So that way, every time a video is posted, it'll go directly into your portable. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma, the chief editor for CSMS Magazine. I am with such a wonderful writer, JT Morse. And we're going to talk about many things within the literary world. But before we get to that, I will have to ask you, JT, these specific questions, because I know you wear many hats. So you said you call yourself a retired dancer, singer, and actor. Why would it be a retired? Is that something that one day you just get up and you decide, well, I'm not going to do this anymore? Because you're very young. You can't be retired from things like that. Could you explain this to the readers of CSMS Magazine?
Well, I mean, I had a 25-year theater career. So, for some folks, that would be retirement. You'd be retirement age. I just happened to have started it,
okay.
In my teenage years.
Right. Okay.
So I had a wonderful singing, dancing, acting career, and then decided I was done with the city life. I was ready to head out into the country. So my husband and I bought an 18-acre ranch out in the middle of the Sam Houston National Forest.
Okay.
And moved
and
about
that's
an
in
hour.
Texas, though, huh?
It is in Texas, right? About an hour and a half north of Houston.
Okay, just before you get any further, just because Texas has been in the news lately, and it's heart-wrenching to see all these people have to go through all these things. So how are you and your husband, your family, coping with this?
We're good. I think we as a family have a very survivalist heart. And I come from a background where I was gifted with a father who could fix anything and make the best of anything. So luckily, I learned those qualities, was genetically gifted them, whatever. So
wow, and you got that gene in you also, right?
I do. Okay. And so when tragedy happens, my go-to is silver linings and optimism. For, okay, well, it could be worse,
Right,
and okay, we have a problem. How do we fix it?
Okay.
And usually that involves duct tape and a paper clip and a rubber band and some spit,
Not much.
or something like that, some MacGyver combination like that. And luckily my husband as well is worked in the mechanics and aviation industry for years.
Okay.
And so he has a very engineering and analytical and mechanical mind.
Right.
So really the only thing, we lost power for a number of days.
Okay.
We were covered in a blanket of snow that the equines, the horses and donkeys aren't used to. We have a great barn and we have blankets for them. So everybody was safe and okay.
Okay.
And so we had one pipe burst on our water well.
Okay.
And so we were without water for about 6 days, without running water for about 6 days.
Okay.
But that doomsday prepper, whatever kind of mentality I have, I had lined the entire chest freezer bottom with water bottles. So we had plenty of water.
Right.
We were just without running water. So the worst tragedy for us personally to happen during this whole freeze and situation was that we couldn't shower. We could, hand bathe, sponge bathe, but there was no full on showering. So my hair was pretty much going into its own dreadlocks by the end of the week.
But not today though.
Right. But aside from that, I mean, that was really it, so we're very, very lucky.
So let's get back to your career now. You are a dancer, you used to be a dancer, an actress, and also a singer.
Yeah. So the adjective retired or former are a little, I use them sparingly.
Okay.
They're almost a falsehood, because I have a booking in 2 weeks that I'm singing for an event.
Okay.
And I performed at the Houston Fringe Festival doing a live, reading of some of my work.
Okay.
And so I and I've even got a dance company that's asked me to consider coming out of retirement to do a production with them later in 2021. So, and I'm playing violin for an event later, this month. So, so I like to say singer, dancer, actress turned writer, editor, photographer.
Right.
Simply to remind folks that that's not my mainstream focus and income these days. Because if I don't, I get tons of audition notices and tons, so I had to do something to help transition myself out of that world predominantly and into the writing side of things. But so it's an interesting, I will always be a dancer. I will always be an actress.
And how long has it been since the transition?
Pardon me?
How long has it been since the transition? And you transitioned
in 2015. So in 2015, so 6 years ago, we moved out here to the ranch.
Okay.
And that was when I kept trying to keep going into Houston for rehearsals and auditions and gigs.
Okay.
And I did it for about 8 months. And then I said, I just can't do this anymore. I'm either going to have to get an apartment in the city and just learn to spend the weekends down there, or I'm going to need to retire and do something else. And so that's when that transition happened.
And you seem to be enjoying it too, since you made such a transition into writing. So do you write full-time or? Full-time?
So that's my full-time gig now. When I made the transition, it was a funny story that after about 8 to 10 months of this waffling of not doing shows, I hadn't done anything creative in probably 2 or 3 months. And my husband looked at me one day and he said, honey, your eye is twitching. You have got to find a creative outlet that you can do from the ranch.
Right.
And so that was when my father is a former newspaper editor and journalist.
Wow.
And people had said to me for years, Jody, you should write. You should be, writing. So I said, well, here it is. Here's an opportunity. Writing is something that would give me a creative outlet, but let me do it from remote. Let me do it from anywhere.
Exactly.
And so I said, well, what's the best bang for your buck in writing? Because I needed that income. I needed something to start it quickly. And magazine article writing. I said, okay, magazine articles are relatively short. Most of them are somewhere in the 1,000 to 2,000 word range.
Exactly.
They are nonfiction, but depending who you're writing for, do allow for some creativity and innovation.
Okay.
And they pay well, comparatively. My other love from the beginning was poetry.
Okay.
Poetry is wonderful. It as well is relatively short, can quick turnaround time, but it doesn't pay squat. That's what I learned. So I said, okay, I'll do poetry for fun, but my mainstream has got to be magazine article. Right. And I quickly really fell in love with interviewing. I love people and I love connecting.
Okay.
And so doing interview articles for magazines gave me the opportunity to still connect with others
Okay.
and to share them with the world, to feature them, to
Exactly.
talk about their work, like what you do, you know. And so it was that, yeah, so I really fell in love with it. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then from there I transitioned into writing short story, flash fiction I
Okay.
love.
Okay.
And so I had won a few contests and had some flash fiction published in some anthologies
Uh-huh.
and places, and then grew into short stories. And then I started writing short, had some short stories published. And yeah, and I'm just now getting to the line, while still doing magazine writing
Okay.
for the bread and butter,
Okay.
to novel length, to book length. And so I spent this past year working on a memoir project that will start seeking an agent next month.
Okay.
And
Now, just
then,
before you say so, I
yes.
look at your website and I see
Mhm.
that the two memoirs that you're currently working on, one of them
Mhm.
is titled Dalliances, I believe.
Dalliances, yes,
Dalliances.
Dalliances.
Okay.
Dalliances, the tawdry tales of Mrs. Most Flirtatious 1994. It's a mouthful of a title, and it'll
Okay.
get reduced to Dalliances. But yes, so it is a very cathartic journey for me. So
Okay.
roughly a year ago, in February of 2020,
Uh-huh.
my therapist, I basically went into my therapist's office, who I love her. I've been with her since before my daughter was born. Goodness, we've been together 17 years.
Okay.
And I flopped on her leather love seat and I said, I've lost all my libido. I have no desire for sex anymore. What is happening to me? Right. I was like, what is going on? And I think and bleep this as you need to, Doc, but I think I'm done with men. And of course, I'm a happily married woman, but this was like, and I was terrified. I was like, what is happening to me?
Okay.
And so she essentially said, I jokingly say, she metaphorically handed me a shovel and said, girl, start digging.
Huh.
And so for the past year, so for 2020, starting in March, I started writing
Okay.
essentially from my first kiss all the way to my current husband, any and all sexual or romantic affiliations that I've had over my
Okay.
lifetime, which there turns out to be about 32 of them.
Wow.
Right. Exactly. So there's a little of the key.
Okay.
Maybe Jody just used it all up, Maybe I just, once you've used it up, that's all you get, But it's, and then, one of the chapters, the hardest chapter I had to write was I was molested by a cousin of mine when I was 6.
Wow.
And writing that chapter,
Okay.
it was something that I had just kind of put away and said that was so long ago.
Right.
It's not important. I'd never really spent time with it or examined it.
Right.
That chapter, what took me a month to write alone, just because there was so much to unpack.
Okay. And so difficult to write also, because it's awakening all these bad memories.
It was. Well, and it's being so long ago,
Right.
Put myself back in that moment and remember details, what I could remember. And then it was one of those situations where when I told my mother about it, she had a very unhelpful reaction. We've talked about it, and and I understand now part of why she reacted that way. But her, when I said, I think I was, a number of years ago, I think I was, molested by this cousin, she said, her first reaction was, oh, no, you weren't. That's a lie. That never happened to you. She straight up denial. And then she eventually came around to, it did happen, but it was your own fault. You're just a slut. And I was like, I was 6. How is that a slut? It's 6 years old. Right. So I don't want to share her, it's her story, and you'll have to read the Dalliances to find out more. But
that's okay.
But but that was examining not only what had happened to me, but then how I had dealt with it or not dealt with it, and how my mother reacted and dealt with it or didn't deal with it, and how it affected all of my future relations with men and sex, and what that was, that sex was essentially a tool to, it was already ruined for me. I was already broken.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
Judy.
sure.
Is it been helpful since the time you began to write this memoir?
Incredibly. In part because I'm part of the other reason I love writing for magazines is I'm a researcher. I am a Virgo to the core researcher.
Okay.
And so when I dive into something, I start researching.
Okay.
And so I have, over this past year, while writing my own, have read so many memoirs by women who have been
in the same situation,
raped and molested. And it has so that alone to realize I'm not alone, and what an epidemic this
exactly
in America and the world.
Right.
Roxane Gay's Hunger memoir just completely devastated me. As well as some others. Carmen Maria Machado's Into the Dream House it's not necessarily about men, but being taken advantage of sexually and how to deal with that.
Right.
So it has been one of the best things I've ever done for myself in my life.
Writing this book.
Opening myself up to that and examining it. And in the book, it's epistolary in that I write letters to all of my former romantic partners.
Right.
And tell them the things that I should have said back then, that I could have said back then, that I wish I had said back then.
Okay.
And now looking back on it, gratitude for them, or anger, or feeling that they took advantage of me, or whatever feeling. So it really allowed me in a fictional way, but in this nonfiction memoir, to express myself to these guys and men, and so it's been a roller coaster, I will say, Ardain. It has been hard, and it has been messy, and it has been ugly, but it's also been beautiful and fulfilling, and I think one of the greatest things that I've done, that I've written.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Are you coming down towards the end of it, or you still?
So I'm in rewrites, right? So I'm in rewrites now. So it's completely written, but I'm going through now with an empathetic eye of if I were these other people that I talk about in the book.
Okay.
How would I feel to read it? Because I don't want to hurt anyone. This is my story. It involves other people, but I don't want to tell anybody else's story.
Exactly.
I want it to be honest, but I don't want it to be damning for anyone.
Exactly.
And so I'm going through now, and of course changing all the names to be fictional.
Exactly, to be fictional. But Judy, it's very difficult what you're trying to do right now, because one of the main reasons why we write books is to touch the lives of others. So, and others have found a way to like what we do because they see themselves and the work that we produce. So what we're trying to do now, you'll find out it's going to be very difficult. They love it. They will adore what you do because they see themselves into it.
And this is my greatest hope for this book. In starting to write it, it was all for me. It was, I need catharsis. I need to work through these things. I need to figure out who I am and where I want to be going in the sexual realm, and where I've been, but in order to do that, I need to know where I've been and why and how.
Oh, I can't wait to read this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So my hope is that this is a book for all of the middle-aged people, predominantly women, but people who have come to this point, like I am at 44 years in my life, realizing what formed us and how and where do we want to go from here. The world has changed so much. I loved your previous interview with the filmmaking couple.
Right.
That couldn't have been
exactly
in 1994 when I was
we talked about it.
Right. And so the world has changed. So I want to write this for other middle-aged women out there who are realizing, I think late in life lesbianism is a thing, you know, or I've dedicated my life to the heterosexual lifestyle, but do I have to do that anymore? What the possibilities are so huge. For us and for people in general, but for sexual beings, period. And so I really, for all of the women out there who feel stuck or who feel, well, I've been straight my whole life, so I must just be straight till the end. Those labels, to me, sexuality is a spectrum. And it's, you know, it's a beautiful spectrum that yes, you may change over your lifetime. And that's okay. And so that's what I hope to help is to help alleviate the boxes that we seem to, as a white American middle-aged to a bit large degree privileged woman, that we stick ourselves in, that in actuality are killing us and trapping us and preventing us from living our fullest lives. And so obviously the follow-up to this book will be what happens with my husband and I over the next, because that's the cliffhanger of this book. You know, so now now that I've done my therapeutic process, now he and I have to sit down and figure out, where do we go from here? Who, you know, we've built this life on one idea and philosophy of romance and marriage and sexuality. That, well, JT just ripped the whole scab off, and so what do we do now, and how does that affect us as a couple and our family, and what do I need to do with this new information, because I still have no idea.
but listen, have you been sharing some of the passages in the book with him?
In vagueness, yes. You know, obviously when you live in the same household with someone, and I've been crying nonstop for 2 hours as I write this, you know, and I come out, obviously he, you know, of course, being a compassionate human being that he is, he says, are you okay? Do you need to talk about it? You know, what's going on? And so I've shared pieces of it with him. Yes. He has obviously seen these stack of books on my bedside called, you know, titles like Women Who Are Married to Men and Find Out They Love Women, or you know, books, you know, Carmen's book, or Chelsea Handler's Confessions of One Night Stands, or whatever her book is. And so he's seen this stack of books, you know, on my bedside relating to sexuality and to sex, and he knows obviously what's going on, but he has not read any actual text at this point in time. And being the person he is, he will be free to and open to. I don't think he ever will, to be perfectly honest. He's not as open as I am of a human being. And so, and that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's TMI. Sometimes it's just too much. And so, yeah, I don't know. And so again, that'll be part of the next part of the process, and potentially a sequel book will be, you know, it reminds me of Glennon Doyle. You know, if you look at Glennon Doyle's journey, she wrote a book that was all about her getting over her addictions, and she's happy in her marriage. And then the next book she writes is her husband had an affair and how she dealt with that and coped with that. And then her third book, Untamed, is all about falling in love with a woman and divorcing her husband. And so similar to that, I'm not saying my journey is going to go the same way, but this is, you know, the first book is examine my past. With the last, you know, chapter or two being, this is where I am currently. And so then the next book, which, you know, maybe 2 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, will be, okay, so what did I do with that information? Right. What is, you know, what became of our life after this? revelation and after this journey that I went on.
Right.
Relationships are so hard that we grow at different paces.
Uh-huh.
And so as a couple, that can be really, it can either be fantastic or it can be devastating.
Yeah.
That while one partner is going through something so epically life-changing,
exactly,
the other just, why can't we just stay the same? You made a commitment to me. What happened to that commitment?
Exactly.
Or these questions that come up. So so the next stage is, what happens to, my marriage, my family, our home. I mean, we have an 18-acre ranch with 24 rescue animals, and an apiary, and all of these things. That what happens to that? So, and I don't know what the answer is yet.
but you're working to make sure that it can still be preserved.
Oh, of course. And so that's where this next stage of the journey is. Okay, now I'll go back to my therapist again with a whole new perspective. She and I have purposefully not talked much. We've communicated a little, but not much over this year of me writing the book.
Okay.
Because it was, I wanted to help myself. I wanted to see how much of this, I'm still reading, other memoirs and self-help books and things.
Right.
But so now it's okay. This is what I've learned. What do I do with this? And, and hopefully she'll be able to, as she always has in the past, give me guidance and encouragement. Yeah. So that Lang and I can, so that my husband and I can figure out, is there some way we can stay married and in what we have, but still, fulfill my new goals? And is the rest of his life going to be celibate because I don't want to have sex with men anymore?
Okay.
Or is it going to be he and I are going to work through this, and start with some sensory work and basically start as if we've never dated, the beginning over of our sexual journey.
Okay.
There's so many possibilities.
Exactly.
So there's a lot to explore and examine, and it's a cliffhanger for me too.
I can't wait. When do you plan on having this? You say next week you'll start looking for a publisher?
Yes, I should finish with if I stay on schedule and we don't have any more crazy natural, disasters, freezes and everything. I'm on schedule to finish with that final proofing and rewrites next week. And then I'm going to start sending out I've been hunting agents, looking, considering different agents. So starting next week, I'll start sending out my first queries to agents. So the literary world is in traditional publishing is so crazy these days. It could be, this book could be out, by the end of the summer. If I find an agent quickly, they find a publisher quickly, it hits, boom, it's, out there. Or it could be 2 years from now. Who knows? It just depends on the right puzzle pieces, the right people falling into place. Me finding the right agent, them finding the right publishing house.
Exactly.
To make it happen. And
it's a several step process. Yeah. And that's why so many authors have decided to give up on finding an agent and to go directly self-publishing. So
which is what I did before. I had a poetry Persona poetry collection I wrote in 2016. And looked for a agent for it, and I couldn't find a single agent interested in poetry collections. And so then I went to small presses and I approached a dozen small presses with it, and some of them were interested, but some of them wanted 80% of the royalties, or some of them wanted, we'll publish it but it won't come out for 3 years, or there were all these, or we like it but we want to change everything about it, kind of issues.
It will be their book at this point, not yours.
Right, exactly. And so I ended up self-publishing. I created a boutique publishing house for myself and published it, as well as another poet's collection of poetry and some other things. And it was amazing. And I learned a lot through that process. But the biggest thing that I learned is I want to spend my time and effort on the creative side and the actual writing.
Okay.
I don't want to spend it on marketing and going to literary conventions and booking all of these things on behalf of the publishing house and my books.
Mm-hmm.
If I can make it happen,
right.
I want to go the traditional route. That way, that's somebody else. There's a PR department and a marketing department, and that's somebody else's job to do those other details that are just, I just want to write, I want to write, and then I want to go on speaking tours and book tours to promote the book.
Exactly.
But all of that other business, I mean, the accounting alone, the taxes, and
it's a lot of work.
Overwhelming. And so for me, I learned it only took me a couple of years, I guess 3 years of running the boutique press, that I realized that's not for me. Nope. I was like, I'm going to cut my losses here. And
you cut your losses.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Definitely. I mean, because it was just, I applaud the folks who do make self-publishing work for them, and they love it and they thrive in that realm. For me, it just...
it's a lot of work. I mean, marketing books is you need to create a niche.
Mm-hmm.
There's a special market for that, and also that can be pretty expensive, from television stations to radio stations to local publications, and you need all that to really get yourself out there. I learned that. I live in a small town in Northeast Florida, St. Augustine.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a town that has a lot of writers, but every time we congregate, it's the same thing we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
How do we break this cycle and let our work fly out there so the whole world could see it? But it's not that easy.
Right. And the other is a lot of my work, having been a stage performer and a theater performer, I see it, some writers say I see my books as movies in my head. Well, I see them as stage productions. And so, so the traditional route for me has a better chance for sub rights. Okay. So for, possible TV shows, movies, theater, theater productions of it.
Right.
I'd love to launch a podcast at some point, and the only thing holding me back is the same. It's all the technical details that I don't know. And in order to set the time aside to learn all of this different technology and how to make this work, takes time away from the passion of the writing.
Maybe your 16-year-old can help you, at this point.
Well, that's unfortunately she doesn't have, podcasting, she doesn't have any experience in that either. And so, but so that's my idea, is I'd love to find a producer who they're going to produce the podcast for me. I just record the episodes, right. And so that kind of thing, I think I have a better chance of making those things happen with a traditional publisher, with those resources, and with an agent that has those resources and already knows those people. So I don't have to do all the legwork of finding those folks and going through, well, that one didn't work out, or that one wasn't the right fit, or that, having a guide, having someone to help me do that, I'm really looking forward to. And I've spent a lot of time researching agents.
Right.
Because I want the right one. I want one who is going to be capable of the things and places I hope to go with my career.
Exactly.
And being such a multi-genre writer, I have two fiction novels in the hopper, as well as the 2 memoirs.
Before we get to that, I know you have a second memoir that you're writing. You're co-writing it with your sister, and it's titled One in Paris and One in Prison. So, it's kind of an intriguing title. So could you explain to me, this is the story of your lives? Is that what it is? One is growing up in Paris, or is going to Paris, and one
in prison.
Up into
yes. So in the years from 2002 to 2004-ish, in this window, we were writing letters to one another, and I was living in Europe at the time, living in Hanover, Germany, but spending a lot of time traveling with a dance company and friends and going to, London and Rome and Paris and all of these amazing places. And at that same time, she was sitting in a, Kentucky State Penitentiary for running a crystal meth lab. And so it's really this, so that's where the title One in Paris, One in Prison comes from. But it's really the journey of, two sisters who grew up in the same household, but their paths diverged, and an exploration of how that happens. Our parents got divorced, but I was 16 at the time and she was 13, and how much of an impact the loss of a father figure in the home had on her more so than me. And those various intricacies, and we laugh all the time about how differently we see the same issue. So the same story told from our childhood, she sees it completely differently than I do.
Because she grew up in a different world.
Exactly. So the things that were traumatic to me were joyful to her, and or vice versa. And then as adult women, having had daughters, we both have, daughters, and how we've raised our daughters very differently. She was in prison while hers was a young, a toddler, and how that has affected their relationship.
Right.
Versus my daughter, who I waited, she wasn't born until I was 29, and I could really focus life on her. Once she was born, my number one priority in life was being a mother. Yes, I was an actress and performer, and then I've become a writer, but all of that is secondary to mama.
To be,
and so just an interesting, and now where we are, my sister and I, for years, we're not friends at all. We couldn't even talk because we didn't have anything in common, and the things we had in common were so bizarrely skewed and ends of the spectrum that we couldn't even talk about them. Talking about motherhood, we couldn't even talk about it because all I could see was, you are not being a good mother. In my opinion, you're not doing things to support your child. And all she could see was, you're a helicopter mom. You're smothering your kid, and so we couldn't even talk about subjects like that we had in common. But now we've gotten to a place in our lives where we're the best of friends. We couldn't be closer. And so One in Paris, One in Prison is, yes, it's just that.
Do you think that co-writing this memoir really helped you to sometimes, you two bridge, the differences, and also put you two sisters right now on the same plateau, just like writing exactly what were hiding over the years in your heart, and you wanted to share that with your sister. So it has been able to put you two together, and the place that you've always wanted to be since you were probably when you were young.
Yeah, it is definitely
love I'm talking about.
Yes, it is, and it has caused rifts with us, and it has also brought us closer.
Okay.
Because, in some ways, something that I didn't even think about before we started in on this project is that she's not a writer.
Okay.
I am. So we're in Jody, we're in my realm.
Exactly.
And so it's taken us a while to find, and part of what has delayed this book coming, to fruition, is trying to find a way that she can express herself without the pressure of being a writer all of a sudden, because she's when she sits down to write something, it's not in her own authentic voice. Exactly. So we've learned a lot of using tape-a-call to record. So very similar to me I've had to take an approach to it more like me writing magazine articles, where I record the interview and then using the transcripts and my notes, write it out, flesh it out.
Exactly.
Because she's not a writer by trade or by education. It's not her. She's not comfortable in it.
Exactly. So in other words, you happen to be writing her story, and then you mix it with yours to create.
Right. That's right. And we've had to go back and forth with that on how to make that work the best. And but we've really, one thing I have loved discovering with her is we've both taken a scientific, investigative approach to it. So when one says something like, well, that's not what happened, blah, blah, blah happened, we laugh about it, and we can see that as from a curiosity standpoint. Well, how did you see it? Like, rather than it being an accusatory or a you're wrong and I'm right kind of a weirdness.
Okay.
We've been able to put it all in a curiosity and more like a scientist discovering something.
Okay.
As Adam Grant, a writer and psychologist and scientist, talks about, being the scientist and investigating when you're having a conversation, rather than being the preacher or the politician or the prosecutor. And so we've really been able to play with that and tap into that ability, and that's been great.
Okay. Another thing, Jody, I know that you edit romance novel, and I was at a writers conference in Atlanta, and we were talking about how difficult it is to create novelistic prose when it comes to romance writing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that the same assertion with the other writers I was with back in Atlanta? Is it really difficult to write novelistic prose when you're writing romance fiction?
Yeah, I hate romance, to be perfectly honest, as a genre, because of this issue, because it is so, it can be so trite and cliche.
Okay.
When not, romance is an interesting realm, interesting genre, because there is a formula to it.
Right.
For the most part, right? There are certain things that most readers expect from romance.
Okay.
There's going to be a guy and a girl, typically, and there's going to be a conflict, and then it's in a happy ending. and to me, I don't enjoy that. There's no twist. There's no surprise. It's not super realistic. So what I have fallen in love with, though, and am re-finding the romance genre, is in LGBTQ realm.
Okay.
And finding new ways to have romance written that isn't so trite and cliche.
Uh-huh.
And so that's been fun. So yes, I edited and worked with one romance novel.
Okay.
And then
that was it.
But the good thing was, it really helped in the one of my novels that I've been working on for years, that's been in the hopper for a while, has romance elements in it, and it really helped me to understand why I had put the main character goes through multiple relationships of different on the sexuality spectrum, and I've worked really hard to make them realistic. Not be that tropey cliche. So it's it's an interesting beast. I have to say, the romance, and I think the people who do it well and the people who enjoy to read it, I think it's amazing. I think there are some incredible romance writers out there and romance readers out there. For me, and so the funny thing with this, Ardain, is related to the memoir I'm writing. Well, it's no wonder I have a splinter in my heart for romance, because Miss 36 relationships over her life, over 44 years. And, well, duh. Clearly, there's some stuff here.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I learned with editing, that that romance was my own stuff got in the way too much. I think as a writer and as an editor, I have to be careful of, I was working with a science fiction manuscript with a writer, and he had quite a few sex scenes in it. And my question to him kept being, why is there a sex scene? Why do you need this sex scene? It doesn't drive the plot. It doesn't really tell us much about the characters. And his response was, well, because in sci-fi, you need some sex. And I was like, I struggled with that, but I had to really work to see as a reader, that's what if there isn't at least some kind of a romantic relationship or sex in this science fiction book, he doesn't like, it doesn't appeal to him as much. And so I had to get past my own blocks and my own issues in order to work with him on that and realize that may not be enjoyable for me to read, but there's a lot of people who enjoy that and reading, romances and sexual encounters. And and so it's amazing in editing. The number one thing editing has taught me is teaching me how to get out of my own way when reading or working with other people's material. And then how I can apply that when writing my own to realize I want to be authentic.
I find out another group of writers, they write compelling novels, and then they use a love story as a backdrop to move the plot forward. Do you think it's because of some readers always looking for some type of a romance that would intrigue? It may not be the protagonist, but someone out there is promoting love and affection. I've seen Marquez doing that, the Nobel, Marquez doing that. I've seen Bill Stylen doing that. I've seen so many other great writers doing the same thing. And these are people who've become classics in literature.
Right. And I think there's two things on it. I think number one is that love is universal. I mean, connecting with other human beings, we all, to some degree, I don't care if you're even a hermit in the middle of the forest, you had parents, somebody gave birth to you.
Exactly.
Right. And somebody's going to discover your dead body at some point, so even that, you're going to be connected to human beings in some way throughout your lifetime. And so I think that's a universal truth, so to speak, that we all deal with. The other is, just as the saying goes, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. A spoonful of sugar, a spoonful of romance can help the life lessons go down. So you can hide. I think that's one of the greatest things that really great fictional novelists do is hide the moral or the lesson or the whatever they're trying to put across, the social traumas, the crisis, whatever it is within romance. So you don't even realize, you think you're reading a love story and you get to the end and realize, gosh, there was a lot about the apartheid in that book, or there was a lot about, whatever, police brutality, or there was a lot of, because who wants to pick up a novel that's all about the apartheid? I mean, that's scary, sad, overwhelming stuff. But if you talk about a romance that happened during the time of that, maybe we can take it because a spoonful of romance helps helps that to go down. And so I think that's a skill and a gift that some fictional novelists have really are honing, and I'm grateful. There are definitely some stories and subjects I would have never wanted to read if it hadn't been cloaked in something else. It didn't have to be romance necessarily, but this is a book about two sisters. Well, it turns out the book is really about rape, but under the guise of it being about these two sisters, I was willing to pick it up. Exactly. And so I think that's an amazing skill, and that some folks have really discovered and are really good at.
Okay. So my question for you, since we're getting to the end of the conversation, you know what? Believe me, I could talk to you for the rest of the day, then beyond, because it's such an interesting.
And me with you, yes, definitely.
Now, you plan on having either the first memoir or the second memoir published, whichever comes first. Are you planning on looking for agents for both memoirs, or?
Dalliances, just because of where I am in the process of both of those manuscripts, Dalliances will definitely come first. Okay. that will be the first one that I land an agent with,
Okay.
and hopefully sell the rights to
Right.
first, because One in Paris, One in Prison isn't
It's not
even
ready.
it isn't ready by any means for anyone to see that manuscript.
Okay.
And in fact, I have a novel, a fictional novel about 3 women who discover their spouses are serial killers, that it's
I
closer
saw
in the
that
process.
when I went to your
Yes.
website, and I saw it too. I was going to
Yes,
ask
and
you.
so that one is further down the road as far as being a finished manuscript ready to go. So more than likely, it wouldn't surprise me if Dalliances comes out,
Okay.
then 3 Killers, 3 Wives,
Okay.
then One in Paris, One in Prison. I may alternate, memoir fiction. I love authors like Elizabeth Gilbert,
Uh-huh.
who have done this, who have made an art of being a
Multi-genre.
multi-genre, writer. And so I could really see my career as far as in traditional publishing going that way.
Unfolding this way.
Yeah. So we'll see.
This is something I always ask at the end of every conversation.
Yes.
Now, what is your favorite writer? It doesn't have to be a novelist. And why?
I hate this question, Ardain.
Because you have so many, right?
Because there's just, and that's so cliche. And I've heard other people on yours, when I watch some other interviews of yours, say the same thing. It's such a hard question because it's so big and so vast. I do have to say, one of my biggest influences is Elizabeth Gilbert. As a person and as a writer, and the career path, she started writing in magazines and then started getting some short stories published, and then her memoir Eat, Pray, Love made it big, and then she had the follow-up Committed, and then she wrote this gigantic tome of a historical fiction called The Signature of All Things. And then she's and now she's City of Girls came out, and it's so she has been my literary spirit guide, so to speak, since before I even knew I was going to become a writer. And so if I had to pick one, if I could only read the works of one writer for the rest of my life, it would probably, she's probably who I would latch on to, simply because we have a past together.
Okay.
And we have a current together, and I am so looking forward to her future works and the things that she's doing in her writing and in her creative world to come. Okay. And so I, as much as there are amazing, Paulo Coelho, he's another one of my literary loves, and of course,
Carmen Maria Machado. That's why so difficult, because it's hard to pick when you have so many writers whose work that you admire.
And that's it. I was just rediscovering Robert Fulghum the other day. I realized he's a writer who wrote, they technically are called collections of essays, but to me they're memoir. I mean, it's very memoir-esque, but he was one of the first books that I picked up, and I just fell in love. I laughed. Jenny Lawson, oh my goodness. Jenny Lawson is an incredible memoirist and essayist and I think that the tie that binds through most of these folks that I love is the humor. They have found a way who, again, similar to The Spoonful of Sugar with the romance, to incorporate humor into their stories. So emotionally, classics like, and I'll get booed and hissed on this, but books like Pride and Prejudice and Jane Eyre and all.
Wow, there's so many of them.
They don't do much for me because they're so heavy and they're so dark and sad. And so these writers that I like all have the humor. They tend to infuse
within the line. Yeah, it's just like giving you a pill and infusing a little sweetness in there, just to make sure that when you swallow it, you don't even realize.
Exactly. My sister and I joke that, we turn everything, if anything's super hard, we see it as a sitcom. Okay, so she'll call me and say, I've had the worst day. Blah, blah, blah happened, then blah, 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 then blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, okay, let's reframe it. Let's look at your day through the lens of an episode of Friends or Jerry Seinfeld, some comedy, show. And it helps because it helps to see, it wasn't the end of the world.
Exactly.
Everything didn't crash around you today.
Exactly.
And in fact, it's pretty funny that you fell down the steps after you forgot to tie your shoe and somebody had told you three times to tie. There's humor in that. And so I think that's, I think that for me, and so I joke that, in my pitch letter, my query letter for Dalliances, I call it a humoir instead of a memoir.
Okay.
Because it's funny. There's a lot of humor. I mean, there are some chapters that are really dark and heavy.
Right.
But on a whole, there's a lot of humor in it because I think with humor comes grace.
Exactly.
And so, so I think that's, so if I had to pin down why I love Liz Gilbert and write, some of the writers I've mentioned, it's the honesty and the rawness, but with this laughter as well, with this element of humor. And
all right, last question.
Yes.
Okay, if there's one lesson you want to give to people like you who would want to embark upon the journey of writing, what kind of lesson would you give them?
One of the cliche phrases that gets kicked around a lot is write what you know.
Okay.
My adaptation of that, or my preference to that, is write what you want to know about.
Okay.
And or write what you don't want to know about.
Okay.
Because those are where you're going to find the truth in yourself. And those are where you're going to find growth and connection.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's some extremes to this of cultural appropriation and some definite sensitivity lines that shouldn't be crossed. I have the whole American Dirt saga and some of these problems. Okay. But in general, write it, what's the question in your heart? Explore that and then see what either fictionally or non-fictionally comes out of that. And when you hit a fork in the road where you say, okay, if I go this way, I'm going to continue to learn about this. If I go this way, I'm going to learn some stuff that I really don't want to know. Oh, for heaven's sakes, take the don't want to know fork.
And that's what I think maybe the latter might be very difficult to do. If you're writing about things you don't want to know about, it might be much more difficult to do.
I agree that it's the more difficult, but I think that's where so much power could reside. And that is, the things that we don't want to think about, that we don't want to talk about. Well, why don't you want to think about and talk about those things?
The fear of the unknown, probably. Once you've done, I think there's a feeling that you've overcome this fear.
Right. And so that would be what I would encourage writers is to, write about what you want to know. And write about the things that scare you. Play with that idea, because I think you might have some of your biggest breakthroughs as a human being as well as a creative.
Okay. Wow, Julie, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. We can talk forever. But I'm sure this won't be the last. And as your book comes out, we'll have to sit down and have just another conversation like today.
I will definitely put you on my PR list of who to reach out to and let
I'm
know.
not sure, but
exclusive first interview with
Okay.
Dr. Ardain. And so but thank you for what you do. Watching your interviews, I love this. I love how casual and friendly and fun you are, yet also professional and doing good work. And
thank you, Judy. All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, bye.